Millionaire arrived home unannounced and saw the maid with his triplets. What he saw froze him. In New York's underworld, the name Alexander Moretti was spoken in whispers, mixed with fear. He controlled the ports, the streams of dirty money, the deals that never appeared on paper. Enemies called him heartless. Allies called him a man who never failed. Those who betrayed him never lived long enough to tell their story. But all that power collapsed on a bright afternoon 14 months ago. Helena Moretti, his wife, was shot dead in broad daylight. Their car had just stopped in front of a kindergarten gate when the bullets tore through the air. Helena had no time to think, no time to be afraid. A mother's only instinct was to lean back and shield the 3 little girls sitting behind her. When her body slumped over the steering wheel, blood spreading across the driver's seat, the 3 girls were still alive. Not a single scratch. Ava, Sophia, Lena. 4-year-old triplets with softly curled black hair and brown eyes exactly like their mothers. Alexander was in Chicago when he received the call. He does not remember whether he screamed or how long he stood in silence. He only remembers the moment he saw Helena lying in her coffin, her face cruelly peaceful, as if she were only asleep. That day, more than Helena was lost. A part of the 3 children's souls died with her. After the funeral, the silence began. The 3 children spoke to no one. They did not cry. They did not smile. They did not react. They held each other's hands and sat for hours staring into empty space as if this world had ceased to exist. Alexander did everything a man with unlimited power could do. He invited the best child psychologists, specialists from Europe, therapies so expensive they could have bought an entire building. He took his daughters everywhere, from Disney World to private islands in the Caribbean. He bought pets, built toy castles, and turned the garden into a child's paradise. Nothing changed. The 3 little girls remained as silent as shadows. In desperation, Alexander turned to the only thing he truly understood: violence. He hunted down the gang that had ordered Helena's murder. One name after another was erased from the map. No negotiations, no mercy, only guns and blood. Within 3 months, the entire gang vanished as if it had never existed. New York's underworld understood the message clearly. Alexander Moretti never forgets and never forgives. But when it was over, when the last enemy had fallen, Alexander stood alone in his study, staring into the empty space before him. There was no sense of victory, no relief, only a cold void spreading inside his chest. Helena did not return, and the children were still silent. Alexander began to flee in a different way. He left home before sunrise and returned only when the night was deep. He turned himself into a machine: meetings, contracts, constant flights between New York, Chicago, Miami, Las Vegas. Anywhere was fine, as long as he did not have to face the hollow eyes of his 3 daughters. The seaside mansion, with 15 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and a tennis court, became the most terrifying place to him. Not because of enemies, but because every corner of the house reminded him of what he had lost. Alexander Moretti, the man who once made the entire underworld tremble, was now powerless before 3 small children. And it was in that emptiness, when he no longer believed in money, no longer believed in violence, when he no longer knew where to run, that fate quietly placed a completely different kind of person at the iron gates of the Moretti estate. A woman with no power, no money, but carrying something Alexander had lost long ago. Her name was Clara Reyes. From the moment the bus stopped at the roadside, Clara knew she did not belong here. Security cameras were mounted everywhere. The fences were high, thick, and cold, like a boundary between 2 worlds. She had not even reached for the doorbell when the gate opened automatically. They had been watching her for a long time. Clara swallowed and stepped inside, one careful step at a time. The stone-paved driveway leading to the mansion was long and straight, as if deliberately stretching her fear. Two men in black suits stood waiting at the main entrance. Their eyes passed over Clara without emotion. Beneath their jackets, she could clearly see the outlines of guns. A voice inside her whispered, "Turn back. This is not a place for you." But Clara did not turn around. She needed this job. She needed the money to pay a lawyer for her brother. Fear was a luxury she could no longer afford to carry. Inside, the mansion was even colder than she had imagined. The ceilings soared, crystal chandeliers. Marble floors polished so brightly they reflected her pale face. The silence was suffocating, as if the house were holding back something far too heavy. Clara was led into the living room, where Mrs. Agnes was waiting. The housekeeper was over 50, her hair silver, her eyes tired, yet still holding a rare gentleness in this house. Agnes looked Clara up and down. No judgment, no pity, just observation. "Is your name Clara Reyes?" "Yes, ma'am." Agnes pointed to the chair opposite her. "Sit down." Clara obeyed. She placed her hands on her knees, trying to keep them from trembling. Agnes was silent for a long moment, then asked directly, her voice low and quiet, "Are you afraid?" Clara understood she was not asking about cleaning work. She was asking about this place, about the armed men, about the invisible power pressing against every wall. Clara lifted her head and met Agnes's eyes. "Yes, I am afraid." Then she continued, slowly but firmly, "But I have been afraid my whole life, and I am still here." Agnes said nothing, but in her weary eyes something shifted. She nodded. "You're hired. You start tomorrow." The next day at 5:30 in the morning, Clara arrived at the mansion with a small suitcase. Her room was in the east wing. Small, but clean. Better than the damp old apartment with rats and mold. On her first day of work, as the two of them walked along the long second-floor corridor, Agnes suddenly stopped in front of a closed door. "Have you ever taken care of children?" she asked. Clara paused. The question pulled her straight into a distant place in her memory. 3 years earlier, the Bronx, a small auto repair shop on a street corner. Her father, Javier Reyes, the kindest man Clara had ever known, was wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. He had worked there for 20 years. Everyone knew him. Everyone liked him. Until that afternoon. 2 men walked into the shop. They spoke briefly. Their voices were calm. They did not need to raise them. They demanded protection money. Javier refused. He said he made an honest living. He owed no one anything. 3 gunshots rang out right at the shop entrance. Clara heard the shots from 2 blocks away. She ran like she had never run before. But when she arrived, her father was already lying on the concrete floor, blood spreading wide, his eyes still open, staring up at the sky as if asking a question no one would ever answer. Her mother never recovered from that shock. 6 months later, she passed away in her sleep. The doctors called it heart failure. Clara called it pain, slowly killing a person day after day. Then came her younger brother, Daniel Reyes, 19 years old. His only dream was to become an engineer. One day, the police knocked on the door. Drugs in the trunk of his car, a gun in his closet. Everything was too perfect to be real. Daniel was sentenced to 10 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Clara lost everything in just 3 years. She was 27, with no parents, a brother in prison. By day, she worked at a cafe. By night, she cleaned offices. In the evenings, she squeezed into the lecture halls of a community college, majoring in early childhood education. Every dollar she earned went to lawyers and to the fragile hope that one day Daniel would be cleared of his name. Clara learned to live with pain, not by forgetting it, but by carrying it with her every day. She blinked and returned to the present. Agnes was still standing there, waiting for her answer. "I have," Clara said, her voice tightening slightly. "But more importantly, I understand what it feels like to lose someone you love?" Agnes looked at the closed door. "The 3 children haven't spoken a single word for 14 months, she said quietly. "No one has been able to reach them." Clara stared at the door for a long moment. "Maybe," she said slowly, "they don't need to be fixed. Maybe they just need someone who understands." Agnes did not answer, but in her tired eyes something very fragile flickered. Perhaps hope, or perhaps only desperation clinging to whatever remained. Clara met the 3 children for the first time on the second-floor staircase. She was following Agnes down the long corridor when she suddenly felt a strange presence, not a sound, not a noise, but the unmistakable sensation that someone was watching her. Clara stopped. On the 5th step, the 3 children stood close together, holding hands. Ava in the middle, Sophia on the left, Lena on the right. Soft black curls fell across their foreheads. Their 3 faces were so identical that without careful attention one might think it was a single child reflected in a mirror. They did not smile. They were not afraid either. Their large brown eyes stared at Clara, empty, expressionless, lacking the normal curiosity of children. That gaze sent a chill down an adult's spine, as if one were being looked through rather than looked at. "That's Ava, Sophia, and Lena," Agnes said very softly, almost in a whisper. "The boss's daughters." Clara said nothing. She simply stood still, lowering her gaze to the children's eye level. She did not smile too much. She did not wave. She did not try to provoke a reaction. The 3 children continued to look at her. Then something strange happened. Their eyes followed her. When Clara shifted slightly, the 3 pairs of eyes moved with her. They did not look away. They did not turn aside. There was no fear, only a silent, focused observation, as if they were memorizing every detail. Clara felt her heart tighten, not from fear, but because she realized that the silence was not empty. It was heavy, pressing down on a person, like a room that had been sealed for too long, no longer containing air to breathe. "They don't talk to anyone," Agnes continued sadly. "It's been 14 months. Clara swallowed. She could not take her eyes off the 3 children. In that brief moment, she saw an image of herself 3 years earlier, standing before her father's body, unable to cry, unable to scream, with only an infinite void opening inside her. Clara lowered her head slightly, not as a greeting, but as a silent acknowledgement. "I see you." The 3 children remained standing there, holding hands, saying nothing. But for the first time in 14 months, their eyes had chosen to stay with a stranger. During her first week at the Moretti estate, Clara did nothing special. She did not ask questions. She did not approach the 3 children. She did not try to draw their attention. She simply did her job, dusting, vacuuming carpets, folding clothes, wiping the stairs, cleaning rooms so vast they made one feel lost inside them. But there was one difference. Clara did everything as if the house itself were wounded. She moved more slowly than necessary. Her hands rested gently on surfaces as though she were afraid of hurting them. When wiping the stair railings, she did not pull hard. When folding the children's small dresses, she smoothed every crease as if touching something fragile. And she sang, not loudly, not clearly articulated, just old melodies, softly, like breath. Songs her mother used to sing while she was alive. Songs that did not need a listener, only a singer. Her singing drifted through the vast mansion, not breaking the silence, but blending into it. The first 3 days passed like this. On the 4th day, while Clara was wiping the second-floor stairs, she felt something change. Not a sound, but a presence. As if someone had been standing somewhere for a long time. She did not turn around. Her instinct told her not to. She continued cleaning, continued singing, her voice steady, neither deliberately gentle nor deliberately cheerful. Just herself. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Clara did not look, but she knew. Ava was standing there. The little girl stood in the doorway, one hand gripping the doorframe, her brown eyes fixed on Clara as if memorizing every movement. Clara did not smile. She did not call her name. She did not turn around. She simply continued to be there. When Clara finally glanced lightly to the side, the doorway was empty. Ava had vanished. But it was the first time in 14 months that one of the 3 children had watched an adult for so long. In the second week, the change began to spread. Clara was sitting in the laundry room, folding tiny dresses, pink, purple, pale blue. She sang, as she did every day. The space was so quiet one could hear the fabric brushing against itself. Then came very soft footsteps. Clara did not look up. A small shadow appeared at the edge of her vision. Sophia stepped into the room and sat down on the floor about a meter away. The little girl did not speak, no expression. She simply sat there, watching Clara fold each dress. An hour passed. Clara still did not look directly at Sophia. She kept a very faint smile on her lips, as if smiling to herself, and continued to sing. Finally, Sophia stood up and walked out. Before disappearing, she turned back to look at Clara once, very quickly. The next day, Lena appeared. She did not enter the room. She only stood in the doorway, her head tilted slightly to one side, listening, like a small bird trying to understand a melody coming from far away. Clara's heart beat faster, but she did not show it. She understood one thing very clearly. If she rushed, everything would shatter. This healing would not come from words, not from questions, not from effort. It came from presence, from being there long enough, patient enough, and genuine enough for the children to believe that this world, though it had once been very painful, could become safe again. Miracles do not arrive with thunder. They come on an ordinary afternoon, in a laundry room filled with the scent of clean fabric and pale light filtering through a small window. Clara was folding blankets, thin children's blankets, light-colored, so light that a single careless movement could send them sliding apart. She moved slowly, as she did every day. When she lifted the stack of blankets, a sheet of paper slipped out and glided softly onto the floor. Clara bent down to pick it up. It was a crayon drawing. A purple butterfly, its wings uneven, lines trembling, the body slightly crooked, as if the artist had paused for a long time before each stroke. To anyone else, it would have been just a clumsy child's drawing. But to Clara, her heart suddenly tightened. She knew at once who had drawn it. Ava. Clara sat down on the floor, holding the picture in both hands. She said nothing for several seconds. She only looked, as if afraid that if she rushed, the moment would disappear. She did not turn around, but she could feel it. Behind the half-open door, a pair of eyes was following her every breath. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered, her voice so light it almost dissolved into the air. "This butterfly is very beautiful." She stood up, holding the drawing, and walked out of the laundry room. She went straight into the large kitchen, where the midday sunlight streamed through the windows, laying a gentle patch of brightness across the wall. Clara found an empty spot on that wall, right beside the window, where every morning the light touched first. She taped the drawing there, not too high, not too low, right at eye level. "Perfect," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. From the hallway, Ava stood watching. She looked at her drawing hanging on the wall, not put away, not forgotten, not treated as meaningless. In those once empty eyes, something stirred, very small, but real. Eva turned away. She said nothing, but she did not take the drawing with her. She left it there. The next day, Clara was dusting the bookshelves in the living room. She sang, as always, a familiar melody, slow and warm. She felt someone standing behind her. Clara did not turn around. Then she heard it. A whisper, so light that if the room had not been completely silent, it would have been missed. "Sing more." Just 3 words, but they were the first words spoken after 14 months of silence. Clara stood still. Her heart pounded so hard it felt as if it might echo out loud. But she did not cry out. She did not weep. She did not turn around. She simply kept singing. Her voice became gentler, slower, as if she were holding something fragile in her arms. And then, behind her, a very soft humming joined the melody. Not words, just sound, but it was the sound of life returning. 2 days later, Clara sat on the floor of the children's bedroom, folding clothes and softly singing a sad song. Ava and Lena were sitting on the bed, watching her, for a long time. Then one of them finally spoke. "Why do you sing sad songs?" Clara stopped folding. She turned toward the 2 girls. "Because sometimes sadness is beautiful, my loves," she said gently. "It means we once loved someone very deeply, so deeply that when they are gone, we still remember. We still feel sad, because love does not disappear just because the person we loved is no longer here." Lena was silent. Her large brown eyes stared at Clara without blinking. Then she spoke, her voice as soft as falling leaves. "I'm sad too." Clara's heart tightened. "I know, my angel. I'm sad too." Eva kept looking at her, as if searching for something in her eyes. Then she reached out. Her small hand touched Clara's cheek, light as a butterfly's wing. Warm, trusting. Clara did not move. She let that little hand rest on her face. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. She let them fall, because sometimes tears are beautiful too. They mean we can still feel, still alive. That afternoon, Sophia sat beside Clara on the laundry room floor, watching her fold towels. Then she asked the most painful question of all. "Where is my mom?" Clara stopped folding. She set the towel down and turned toward Sophia, not knowing how to answer. "Your mom is happy in a faraway place now," Clara said slowly. "And she wishes for you to be happy too." "How do you know?" Sophia asked. "Because my parents are in a faraway place, just like your mom." Clara looked at Sophia. Her eyes were red and swollen. "I miss my mom's hair," Sophia whispered. It smelled like jasmine. She hugged me every night. I used to smell her hair before I went to sleep. Now I can't remember it anymore. I try to remember, but I can't. So. Clara's heart shattered into a million pieces. She reached out and gently stroked Sophia's hair. "You will remember, my angel. Maybe not with your nose, but with your heart. The things we love never truly disappear. They live inside our hearts." Clara looked at Sophia and cried. For the first time in 16 months, she cried out loud, not silently, but openly, sobbing, in pain, in release. Sophia wrapped her arms around Emma. At the doorway, Lena and Ava stood watching. Then they began to cry too. They stepped closer. Clara pulled them all into her arms. All 4 of them held each other and cried. Week 6. A quiet afternoon. Clara sat in the kitchen, folding tiny clothes that still carried the soft scent of sun-dried fabric. On the wooden table in front of her, 3 little girls sat in a row, little Sophia, Lena, and Eva. 3 pairs of small legs swung in the air, gently brushing against one another in a rhythm known only to childhood. Clara began to sing, not sad songs, but a joyful one, a song her mother used to sing in the happiest days of her life, about sunlight, about love, about hope. "Do you know this song?" Clara asked softly. Little Sophia shook her head first. Lena tilted her head, thought for a second, then shook hers too. Ava blinked, puckered her lips, and followed with a shake of her head. "Did your mother ever sing this song to you?" All 3 nodded. Their eyes lit up at the same time, as if they had just touched a distant but warmly glowing memory. "Then let's sing together," Clara smiled. "I'll sing the main part. You sing along." Clara began. Her voice was slow and gentle, guiding the three small unsteady voices behind her. Lena sang ahead of the beat. Ava often came in a line late. Little Sophia sometimes forgot the words and simply hummed with the melody. But no one cared. They sang. Together. Like a family. Music filled the kitchen. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, laying a soft golden glow across the wooden floor and over the children's tousled hair. On the wall behind them, the purple butterfly painting was still there, a silent witness to everything that had happened. Agnes stood at the kitchen doorway. She did not know how long she had been standing there. She only knew that before her eyes, Ava was sitting on Clara's shoulders, her hands tangled in Clara's hair, laughing endlessly. Lena sat on the table, her legs swinging, her mouth wide open as she sang out of tune. Little Sophia sat close to Clara, hugging her cloth doll tightly, singing softly, but with deep concentration. And Clara... She folded the tiny dresses, smiling, singing along with the three girls, calm and gentle, as if this were something she had done her whole life. The afternoon light poured in, bathing everything in gold. The purple butterfly on the wall was still there, a witness to a miracle. Agnes raised her hand to cover her mouth. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She stepped back from the doorway, her hands trembling as she took out her phone and dialed Alexander. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. "What is it, Agnes?" Alexander's voice came through, cold and brief. "You should come home. I'm busy. You should come back now." A long silence followed on the line. What happened? Agnes wanted to speak, wanted to shout that his children were laughing, singing, coming back to life. That a miracle was happening right there in the kitchen. That he needed to come home immediately. But she was afraid that if she said it out loud, the miracle would disappear. "It's just, you should come back." Silence. Then Alexander said, "I'll come back when I'm done." And he hung up. Agnes stared at the dark screen of her phone, sighed softly, then turned back toward the kitchen, where the laughter was still echoing through the house, and she wondered. When Alexander returned, would he recognize the miracle growing beneath his own roof? Or would he destroy it, as he had destroyed so many other things in his life? After Agnes's phone call, Alexander had a sinking feeling that something was wrong. He hurried home. The front door closed behind him, and as it had every day for the past 14 months, silence wrapped around Alexander. But this time, something was different. He heard a sound, not the footsteps of his guards, not the clatter of objects being moved. It was a sound Alexander had not heard in this house for a very long time. Laughter. Alexander froze, his heartbeat spiked. By instinct, his hand went to his side, where a weapon would normally be. But this was not the sound of danger. This sound was warm, fragile, so real that he was afraid that if he breathed too hard, it would vanish. He moved forward slowly, as if walking inside a dream. The laughter came from the kitchen, the place that had once been the heart of the Moretti family. He stopped at the kitchen door. His hand rested on the handle. For the first time in a very long while, the powerful man's hand was trembling. Alexander pushed the door open. Afternoon sunlight flooded the kitchen, washing everything in a warm, golden glow. Tiny dust particles floated in the air, sparkling like fragments of old memories. And there, right before his eyes, was the impossible. Lena was sitting on Clara's shoulders, laughing loudly and calling out, "Clara, you sing so beautifully." Alexander Moretti stood motionless at the kitchen doorway, like a stranger spying on his own life. The 3 children had no idea he was there. They laughed, They sang. They were so natural it hurt. Clara gently shifted to keep Lena from slipping off her shoulders, her mouth still following the familiar melody. The scene was too perfect, too peaceful, and completely beyond Alexander's control. Part of him wanted to step forward. The other part could not bear it. He, Alexander Moretti, the man who had built an empire on fear and obedience, was now standing outside his own children's lives. He was not the one being called. He was not the one being trusted. The feeling crushed his chest. Jealousy, shame, anger, emotions he had never allowed himself to acknowledge now surged at once, violent and uncontrollable. "What the hell is going on here?" Alexander's voice tore through the kitchen. The singing cut off as if strangled. The laughter vanished. The sunlight remained, but the warmth did not. Lena stiffened on Clara's shoulders. Her face drained of color, eyes wide as she stared at the man in the doorway. That was not the look a child gave her father. It was the look of fear. Clara felt the small body trembling. She bent down and carefully set Lena on the floor, as if handling a bomb that could explode at any moment. "Sir, I was just—" "You were hired to clean," Alexander roared, striding into the kitchen, each step falling like a hammer blow. "Not to turn my house into a circus." Ava and Sophia retreated against the counter, hands tightly gripping each other. The eyes that had just been shining were now clouded with panic. Lena burst into tears, choked, terrified sobs, and ran to hide behind Clara, her small hands clutching desperately at her skirt. Clara straightened. She did not kneel. She did not bow her head. "The children are happy," she said, not loudly but firmly. "For the first time in 14 months they are talking, laughing, singing. Don't you see that?" "I don't need you to teach me how to be a father," Alexander snapped, stepping closer, his face flushed, veins standing out along his neck. "They are my children, not yours." Clara stepped back one pace, not out of fear, but because Lena was shaking behind her. "I am the only one who made them speak again," Clara said slowly, each word clear. "How many specialists have failed? How much money have you poured into this? You can fire me, but you cannot deny that." No one had ever spoken to Alexander Moretti like that. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then Alexander's face darkened. "You're fired," he said coldly. "Pack your things. Leave immediately." Clara looked at him. There was no pleading in her eyes, no fear, only a deep, aching disappointment. She knelt, gently prying Lena's fingers from her skirt. The little girl sobbed. "Clara, please don't go." Clara's heart shattered. She wiped Lena's tears. "Everything will be all right, my angel," she whispered. "You'll be okay." Then she stood, back straight, chin lifted. Clara Reyes walked out of the sunlit kitchen, leaving behind 3 sobbing children, a father breathing hard with rage, and a house that had just lost its miracle. The days that followed passed like a long, unending nightmare. Silence returned to the Moretti mansion, but this time it was different. Before, the 3 children had been silent toward the entire world. Now that silence was reserved for only one person, Alexander. The next morning, he tried to have breakfast with them. 3 small plates were neatly arranged on the table. The bread was still warm. But the moment Alexander sat down, Ava, Sophia, and Lena all stood up at once, without looking at him even once. They left the room, leaving behind 3 untouched plates and a father frozen in his chair. On the second day, Alexander went into the nursery. He spoke. He apologized. He explained. He promised. He begged. But the 3 children turned their backs and stared at the empty wall, as if he did not exist. On the 3rd day, Alexander could not sleep. He stood outside the nursery at midnight, watching his 3 children lying pressed together in the pale moonlight. He reached out, then stopped, his hand suspended in midair. Ava opened her eyes. She looked straight at him, not afraid, not crying. "You fired Clara," Eva said, her voice flat, cold enough to steal Alexander's breath. "I hate you." 3 words, short, sharp, and enough to kill a man. That was the last time Eva ever spoke to him. Alexander left the nursery like a walking corpse. He sat in his darkened study, a bottle of liquor on the desk, Helena's photograph turned face down. For the first time since the funeral, he cried. Not from anger, not from helplessness, but from a truth he could no longer escape. He had destroyed the only thing that could save his children. Not because of enemies, not because of danger, but because of his own pride, jealousy, and fear of being replaced. When Alexander finally lifted his head, eyes red, voice hoarse, he said to the man standing before him, his right-hand man, "Find her for me." And somewhere out there, Clara Reyes was continuing her difficult life, unaware that the truth was about to be revealed and that fate was preparing to cross their paths once more. Clara Reyes met Alexander Moretti again in a small cafe in the Bronx. No bodyguards, no armored cars, no glamour. Just a man in a black suit sitting quietly in the corner, a cup of coffee long gone cold in front of him. Clara recognized him immediately, not because of his power, but because of the exhaustion that seeped from every movement. Alexander looked much older than the man who had once shouted at her in that sun-filled kitchen. His beard was untrimmed, his eyes sunken, as if he had gone many nights without sleep. Clara wanted to turn away. But Mrs. Agnes had called her the night before, her voice trembling as she spoke about the 3 children, about the silence returning, about Eva's cold eyes, and Clara had not been able to sleep since. Alexander stood up when he saw her. He did not step forward right away, as if afraid that if he took even one step, Clara might disappear. "I need to talk to you," he said. His voice no longer carried command, only fatigue. Clara folded her arms. "You have 10 minutes." Alexander sat down, leaving distance between them, like strangers. "My children, they've gone silent again," he said. "The moment you left." Clara nodded. "I know, Mrs. Agnes told me." Alexander looked down at his hands. "They don't look at me. They don't speak to me. They hate me." Clara remained silent. "I know who I am," Alexander continued. "I've done unforgivable things, but with my children I don't know what to do." He lifted his head, looking directly at Clara for the first time. "I was wrong. I was jealous. I was ashamed that you could do what I couldn't, and I destroyed everything." Clara could not look at him. She turned toward the falling leaves outside. "I know about your father," Alexander went on. Clara turned back sharply, eyes wide. "You investigated me?" "I also know about Daniel," he continued. "Your brother is in prison for something he didn't do." Clara stood up. Tears fell, anger rising. "You have no right. You dug into my life. What do you want now? To bribe me? To use my brother to force me back? Who do you think you are?" "No," Alexander stood as well. "It's not like that. I will help Daniel, whether you come back or not. I have the best lawyers. I have connections inside the system. I can find who framed him, reopen the case, get him out." Clara searched his face for deception. She found none, only exhaustion, regret, sincerity. "Why?" she whispered. "You owe me nothing." "No," Alexander nodded. "But it's the right thing to do. I've done too many wrong things. The blood on my hands will never wash away. But at least I can do one right thing. Help an innocent man leave a place he never belonged." Clara looked at him for a long moment. "If I come back, you have to change. Truly change." "Tell me how." "Be home. Really be home. Not just drop in for 2 hours and fly away again. Eat with them, read to them, know their fears, their dreams. They don't need a mafia boss. They need a father." She paused, looked straight into Alexander's eyes. "Choose, Mr. Moretti. Your children or your empire. You can't have both." Alexander stood there, staring at her for a long time, and finally said, "I choose my family. Please, help me." The next day, a taxi stopped in front of the iron gate. The gate opened. Someone stepped out. "She's here!" The cry rang out from the second-floor staircase. Ava, the first word she had spoken since the day she had coldly said, "I hate you, Dad." This time, her voice was no longer icy. It trembled, full of hope, full of life. Sophia and Lena ran after their sister. 3 small pairs of feet raced down the stairs so fast that Mrs. Agnes had to hurry to open the front door before the children could reach the handle. Clara stood there, a simple white dress, a small bag over her shoulder, black hair neatly tied back. But what made the 3 children freeze for a brief second was her smile. The warm smile they had missed for 3 long days that felt like 3 years. "Hello, my little angels," Clara said softly. "Miss Clara, Miss Clara." All 3 shouted at once. They ran like arrows. Eva wrapped her arms around Clara's waist. Sophia hugged her back tightly. Lena looped her arms around Clara's neck. The 3 of them cried and laughed at the same time, calling her name in joyful chaos. "We thought you were gone forever," Sophia sobbed. "We missed you so much," Lena choked. Clara knelt down and opened her arms, pulling all 3 into a tight embrace, holding them as if afraid that if she let go, the miracle would vanish. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, tears falling onto their small heads. "I'm sorry I left. I never should have gone." "We forgive you," Eva said, her voice small but clear. Eva lifted her tear-stained face. "You'll stay, right? Stay with us? You won't leave again, right?" Clara looked up. Alexander Moretti stood in the living room. No suit, no gun, just a father with eyes red from sleepless nights. He nodded, slowly, firmly. Clara looked back at the children. "I will stay," she said. "I promise." Alexander stepped forward and knelt down to their level. "I apologize to her," he said, his voice trembling. "I asked her to come back because I love you, because you need her, and because I was wrong." Ava looked at her father for a long moment. There was no hatred left, only a child's cautious uncertainty. "You'll stay home too, right?" she asked. "Like Miss Clara?" Alexander's heart shattered and mended. "I will," he said, "every day." Lena stepped forward and placed her small hand in her father's. "Do you really promise?" "I promise," Alexander whispered. The 3 children hugged him. Alexander Moretti, the man who once made the entire underworld tremble, knelt on the marble floor, holding his children and crying. Not because of weakness, but because he had been saved. Clara sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Agnes stood at the doorway, turning her face away as silent tears fell.